This here is a Curt trailer wiring harness with a flat 4 connector for the 2022 to 2024 Honda Civic. This happens to be a sport hatchback. This kit's about as plug and play as you can get for a connector kit for this car. That is the number up in the corner. It's made by Curt. It's got all the connectors on it to plug in and intercept your taillight signals and your turn signals without doing any T-taps or any kind of splicing into wiring in the existing harness. So that's a big reason I purchased this one. There's other ones available for this car, but you have to do a lot more cutting into the OEM wires. There is no cutting into the OEM wires with this kit. Like I said, I got this from eTrailer. This is just a quick look at the components in the box. This is a little bit more of an in-depth install than my old 8th gen Civic because the newer cars with the LED taillights, there's not enough power sent to the rear taillight signals because the LEDs consume so little energy that you need to send additional power to run trailer lights in this particular car, and this is very common for a lot of newer cars with the LED taillights. So they give you a lot of wire here. This is going to be your positive power wire that they want you to run to your battery for power, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you a different way and a cleaner way to do that. So that's that. They give you this bag with some zip ties, some crimp connectors, which I may not use. The inline fuse, the 10 amp fuse that you're supposed to run in line with this. However, I'm not going to use that as well. I'll explain here in a minute what I mean by that, and I'm not going to use this piece, and I'm not going to run the power wire to the battery. And the remaining pieces here is just one wiring harness. So you got this black box. It's got a little mounting tab here. You might be able to put double-sided tape on the back and mount it somewhere in the trunk. We're going to go over that. But you got your long wire here. This goes to the right side taillight to intercept the blinker signal, I believe, for when you're turning right. This is the connector for the trailer, and this is the bigger wiring harness with the white wire here, which is your ground to your chassis. And there's two sets of connectors here. One is for your left turn signals, and one is for your brake lights. The majority of the connections are going to be on the left side of the car, and that is where the fuse box is located under the dashboard, the left side of the car. So what I'm going to be doing is using an ADA circuit to run power from the fuse box back to this module, running that power wire inside the car. I'm going to clean install all the way back to this box, which I'm going to hide inside the interior. So this here is an ADA circuit. You can get these on Amazon. I've used these for various projects to supply power to other projects, you know, back when I was running gauges to the car, S2000 oil pressure gauge, you know, running lights, interior lights, running any kind of aftermarket USB powered outlets or anything. These are useful for so many different things. They come with 10 amp fuses in here. Basically what it looks like, this plugs into your OEM fuse box under your dashboard. There's two slots for fuses here. The first slot will be the OEM circuit you're going to splice into, and the second pair of slots above here is for the power wire circuit fuse. So we're going with a 10 amp to match the Curt 10 amp fuse they include for their inline connector, and this is basically replacing that and keeping all the wiring inside the car. So this is a look underneath your 11th gen setup here. Here's my clutch pedal, and this is the fuse box I'm talking about. You got all these fuses in here for OEM functions. I'm sure most cars do have a few free slots. So what I have here is a test light, and I have it grounded, and I'm going to go through and poke these and find one. As you can see, this is lit up on this 10 amp fuse right here. That means that has power when the car is completely off, because I do not have the keys in the car. All right, so your fuse panel layout label is right underneath your steering wheel column here. And taking a look at this, I did notice that there is fuses here listed for sunroof. It's a 20 amp fuse, number 16 for sunroof. I think I'm going to try to use that. I just need to verify that that fuse has power when the car is completely off, because I thought about this a little bit, and originally I wanted to wire it to a fuse that only came on when you had the ignition on. However, the instructions from Curt want you to run that power wire for that black box to your battery terminal itself. So you do that, you're going to have power supplied to the box at all times, and there must not be a concern of it draining your battery when the car is off. It must consume almost no electricity at all. So I'm going to try to find a fuse under here. Hopefully the sunroof has power on it when the car is off, and the car doesn't have a sunroof because this is a sport model, so I figured that'd be a good one to tap into. So the car is completely off right now, using a test light under number 16 here. You'll see I do have light. That means I have power when the car is completely off. You could probe around a few others to see if you want to use a different one. I'm going to try to use one, like I said, that my car doesn't have a circuit for. There's also heated seats and stuff this car doesn't have, which I could also use. They look like they have power when the car is off too. Let's just go with 16 on this one. I also thought about it in the sense that if you're pulled over and broke down on the side of the highway and you need to walk somewhere to get help or something, and you want to have your hazard lights on and you have your keys with you so no one tries to steal your car or whatever, the trailer lights will also have the hazards going on them if you have this wired to a fuse that, you know, supplies power to the unit at all times. So I'm gonna try to get this 20 amp out. I don't even think I need to put this back in because the car does not have a sunroof. All right, so a little bit of a screwdriver's help, I'm able to pull the 20 amp out. This panel pulls up pretty easy. You just get your fingers under it. It's got a couple of push clips in it and it pops right off. Very, very easy. So that'll allow you to run the wire kind of underneath the plastics through here. You can probably don't even need to pull that off. You can probably just feed it underneath this piece here. I'm gonna go ahead and crimp my power wire to this ATA circuit. Give it a couple tugs, make sure it's nice and tight. If my car did have a sunroof, I'd be installing a 20 amp fuse back in the bottom 2 slots there. But because it doesn't, I'm assuming I can just leave that out and I won't have any problems. I'm gonna go ahead and start fishing this wire through, kind of tucking it underneath the plastics. Getting the wire back this far is pretty straightforward, just tucking it underneath the side panels and pushing it up in. But this is gonna be a little tricky. I'm gonna try to pop this panel off and run it underneath to try to fish it around the rear of the seat here. One of these plastic push tools, trim removal tools with it. It's probably gonna come in handy now just to save your fingertips from pushing this underneath the plastic. This privacy cover comes right off of that latch. Go ahead and remove this trunk tray. At that point, I'm just going to pull up on this plastic in the back. This piece just comes right up. Got to give it a little attitude. 4 green clips on top. I don't know what this sock-like thing is down here. Maybe it's just to prevent this plastic piece from rattling. But so these front tie downs, you can flip up and then flip the plastic piece up inside them, and that will expose a Phillips head screw behind them. That's what the screw looks like inside there. Same to the other side. That'll remove both of these pieces, and now you can pull this trunk tray right out. I bet there's a screw behind here that holds this whole thing in. The rest is just push clips. Plastic didn't work. I gotta go to metal screwdriver here. That popped it right out. Yep, Phillips head behind there. Same thing with the other side. All right, so now with that screw out, let's see if I can pop this off without any other issues. So with that popped out, this is actually like riveted. This plastic piece is riveted to this fabric piece. So get it over your kind of tie down hook back here. There's 2 clips down here as well. This plastic piece is actually glued to the fabric as well. All right, so I got the power wire cleanly routed. You can see it right here, all the way up, kind of around and following in this OEM wiring harness with a bunch of zip ties, right around the Easter egg hidden fuel door release cable, back down around this conduit, all the way down, and it's coming off right down here. Don't cut this to length until you're totally done with your install and leave a little bit of a service loop, but still got a lot of wiring to do. But I pulled this side cover off. There's only 1 screw, just like the other side. Same exact procedure to remove that. So I got this back. Now I have the green wire, which is the turn signal for the passenger side, routed over to this taillight. I'm gonna use this OEM wiring harness here and run this green wire with a bunch of zip ties along that nice and clean. But in order to access the turn signals, we have to go ahead and pull the taillights back. So this has to be done anyway to install the hitch, which is going to be a separate video. So stay tuned for that on the channel, subscribe. But go ahead and start now and removing the taillights. You just got to pop these covers off on each side. And we got to remove the whole rear bumper anyway to put the hitch on. So we might as well get started on that. be careful because I actually ended up breaking this top one off, but I don't know if there's anything I could have done to prevent that. This wasn't very easy to remove. So to remove the rear bumper, if you do have OEM splash guards, you need to remove them. This is what it looks like when it's removed. You can see the profile where it's dirty underneath, but there is a screw hidden underneath the splash guard, a Phillips head. This is a right angle screwdriver I have. Very, very handy tool. Little ratcheting screwdriver, so I don't have to take the rear tires off to get this bumper off. Get the screws out on each side. This is a bracket, the lower bracket for the splash guard. Now I put some painter's tape along the body of the car just so when I'm pulling the bumper off I don't damage any of the paint. But there is one further screw. I'm using a long Phillips head screwdriver right now, number 2. There is another screw up here. As you can see. So what we just did there, do to the other side, and then once you're done with that, go ahead and take these 10mm bolts out, the top right here that are exposed now since you took those covers off. Once you take those off, we're almost there. We got to go underneath and take some push pins out of the bottom. So when you're underneath the car, there's just 2 push pins, plastic push pins on this diffuser. And I believe once we get those 2 off, the whole bumper should pop out. Next thing you want to do is remove these 2 bolts on the taillights. They are an 8mm hex. So once those bolts are out, this taillight's going to be pretty loose, but you got to look in here, and you got to, to access the taillights, you got to pull this back, whether you're doing a hitch install or not. There's this little tab up here that the headlight gets pressed into the car first before it's secured. So you got to pop that through, squeeze it with some pliers and whatnot to compress the tabs, and push that pin through, and then the taillight will come out to the left of the car. There we go. And finally, when you do this, you are exposing the wires inside that you need to intercept for the light signals. I've been thinking of a plan and trying to just see it through of what possible way to get the wires through these grommets and not cut the OEM grommets and keep the car nice and sealed. And it's honestly a pain in the ass. So the harness is nice that you can not have to cut things and just plug it into the taillights, but the curt instructions are pretty much useless at this point. They just say use a fish wire, and there's really no good pictures of where to fish and route the wires. So I'm trying to come up with a plan of how to get all of this through that OEM hole without cutting this grommet. Same thing with the passenger side blinker. You got this one connector that's got to feed through this hole right here. What I've done is take the electrical tape, the factory electrical tape, off of this wire, and you can pop this out just like that. And so that takes care of the wiring to the black box to give the signal to it. However, we still need to figure out how to get this cleanly to the trailer to allow the trailer to connect to it. On my previous 8th gen, the rear bumper was all scratched up, so I really didn't care. So I would just leave it in the trunk and then pull it out and let it hang over the rear bumper and connect to the trailer when I use the trailer. This being a brand new car, the rear bumper being in perfect shape, ceramic coated and whatnot, I don't want to have this hanging down on the rear bumper and scratching it from every vibration and every turn I take with the trailer. So my plan is to run it through this OEM grommet hole here. I've taken the electrical tape off, so this is floating now. I popped it out of the hole. Problem is this hole is too small for this to pass through. No matter, it gets almost the way, but this flares out towards the rear, so you can't stick this through the hole. So what I'm gonna have to do, it's kind of ironic that this is a plug and play harness. What I'm gonna do to make this a clean install and to not cut any of the OEM stuff is to just cut the harness. You know, you can already see the shrink tube from Kurt, but what I'm going to be doing is just cutting these 3 wires straight across back here, routing them cleanly through here. Same thing with this. I'm just going to cut all 4 wires, pull the wires through that grommet, electrical tape it all back together. Same thing with this one. I'm going to pull that 1 wire, cut that 1 wire, that green wire, in half, pull it through, and reconnect it. That way I can have all the wiring pass through the OEM holes, not drill any new holes, keep everything factory sealed. Obviously when the wire comes through this OEM grommet, wrap it all back up with electrical tape just like the factory had it. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass, and I really don't see another way to do it. I've looked at all the access holes and there's really no way to cleanly pass these connectors through and have it sealed. So yeah guys, this is a pretty in-depth install, a lot more than I expected I'd have to do to this car to get it clean and how I wanted it. But you know, the way I'm going to do it, I don't have to cut any of the OEM wires. It's only going to be cutting the Kurt wiring harness wires and resoldering them together. Right, so I've cut this and I got the harness loose now. I'm going to go ahead and feed it through the OEM grommet, poke these wires through, pull them. This OEM grommet's going to have to stretch a little bit because it's not meant for a bundle this big. If I could do it over, I already realized I messed up. I would have cut this a lot further back. I didn't cut these wires far back at all, but it'll be just enough hopefully to get this through there. All right, so I was able to, with the little amount of wire I had, so I'd advise cutting it way back further inside the car, shrink tube solder these together. These are a shrink tube solder kit. You can get them on Amazon. I'll leave the link in the description for these as well. But now that everything is passed through the OEM harness, you can put this back like OEM here, and you have all your plug and play connections ready to reinstall the taillight now. That all electrical taped back up. And I'm gonna go ahead, try to, everything's plugged into each other. These just have to plug into the headlight now. And hopefully this bundle behind there is not going to cause any issues putting this back on the car. I really hope not, because that would totally suck. A little finagling, but the harness is behind there and all clear. Now we're going to go ahead, put these 8mm bolts back in and seal the deal. As you can see, there's my wires coming out from the inside of the car. So we're going to do the same thing on the passenger side. And this will be a lot easier because there's half the connectors. Feed the turn signal connector through. Feed it much more wire than I did previously. Cut this way back here. Strip the ends. Now I can feed this through the OEM grommet and wire that back into the car. Then I can plug these together, and that is just the turn signal. The brake light is not affected on the passenger side, so these plug back into the OEM taillight now. All right, we got the taillight all electrical taped up. Passenger side, that is. Go ahead, plug in your brake light signal, and then your intercepted right turn signal. Of course, the bundle is much smaller, so I'm not too concerned getting this back in as I was the other side. That's it. My last thing to do wiring wise is snip the 4-pin connector end so I can feed it through that grommet I showed earlier. This is gonna be a tight squeeze, but I got the end of this connector cut going through this OEM grommet here. All All right, so here's a final look at the routing for the passenger side. You see that green wire has zip tied nicely all along the OEM harness. Follows the OEM harness up to where the trailer connector exits and hangs down. That's the bundle of shrink tube with all the reconnected wires in it and the soldering shrink tube. All these wires are going to follow over, and I'm going to mount this over in this well. The only other thing you need to connect still, besides connecting the power wire still to the module, is this grounding lug. They do give you a self-tapping screw if you want to drill a hole and ground it somewhere unique, but this OEM ground right here, right above the OEM harness, is going to work just perfect. I'm going to undo this bolt, slide this ring terminal in there, put the bolt back in, and then we'll just have to figure out how to clean this up a little bit, mount this black box. One final look at the completed routing. I have this all zip tied together. I ended up just zip tying the black box to this above the strain relief here for the OEM conduit. And when I put the interior panel back in, it's going to just push it back, keep it tucked up. It's probably going to lay against the fabric there. But connected the power wire together, used the soldering shrink tube piece there. Obviously I have a little bit of a service loop for the power wire, but that's how it's going to go, guys. It's just going to tuck in there like that. Everything's nice and neat. And that's where obviously the hitch pops through. This is how much I have dangling. I'm going to come up with a solution to nicely mount this underneath the diffuser in the rear where the hitch is. But I have enough hanging down there. I think I'll be okay. I'm going to go ahead and put the interior back now, see if this all fits nicely. Okay, so I got the car up on jack stands now to get a better angle to show you how I'm going to finalize the position for this electrical connector now that I got it hanging down below the diffuser here. So this is kind of my prototype. I designed a fixture to hold this housing captive, and my prototype had this little extension off the side that I was going to slide in here. The idea was that when I am towing, I made this extension off the side so that I could plug in the connector there and it wouldn't be dangling in the breeze. And I thought that would all work out great. However, when it's disconnected, the length of this loop is not really as long as I would like. So plugging it into the cap itself makes it pretty difficult when I'm trying to go around this piece here. So I ended up revising this and making it much simpler. I think what I'm going to do is just take this piece off that holds the cap on it. You can take this off over the connector on the end, and once it's off, I'm just going to trim the end of it and make it just a single cap with no tether. And when I take it off the tow, I'm probably just going to take it off the car and throw it in the door pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this. If this does end up flying off when I'm driving, they're like 99 cents online. It's a Curt part. I can leave the description below if you want to stock up on a few of them. I think that how well it grips this piece, I'm not going to have any issues with it flying off because of speed. So with a pair of snips here, I'm just going to go along the radius. Cut that off. This is a simplified piece I was just talking about. Just got these off the printer. Painted it flat black on the front, kind of match the color of the diffuser. And this will just nest the connector, like I mentioned before, really nicely like that. Go ahead, put the cap on. You can see I left like 20 thousandths clearance, so you can push the cap down all the way. I'm actually going to use some stainless steel nuts with nylon locking inserts in them and a couple oversized washers to install this, because taking a look underneath here, I actually don't really need to use a blind hole. I can get behind. You can see where I marked, put like the bolts through and just screwed them a little bit and made an indent in the plastic of where the center mark is going to be. I can pull this down and access the back side of that without an issue. So I have this little mini 3/8 wrench to put over these 1032 nuts. I'm gonna go ahead and drill the first hole, and then I'm gonna use the part itself as a template for the second hole. I am using a 3/16 drill bit. I know I'm gonna have to step up a little bigger than this, one size bigger than this for my final drill size to clear the 1032 screw, but this fits inside the parts I made with a little bit of clearance, so I can use the part as a template. Pull this back out, and now you got your two holes drilled. You can go ahead, you can reach behind there, Get your nuts up there. You can use a regular wrench. You probably have plenty of room, but I have that mini wrench. If you guys are interested in these parts as a kit with the hardware and the nuts and everything to secure this, just like I'm doing in this video, leave a comment below. I could start selling these as a kit on Race Builds, and I could leave the link in the video description. But if I get enough interest, maybe I'll start doing it. If you're looking to do the same project, let me know, and you want these parts, I could replicate them and let you guys know. I'll leave a comment and pin it in this video if I do decide to start making these. Got the bottom nested in there. Put the top piece on. You can start threading these in loosely just to bite into the plastic, but this will make it easier for you to go up there and get your nut started on the backside. Since the studs are kind of stuck up in there, it's going to make it easier to drop these washers on from just pulling this down a little bit. A regular size wrench would definitely work here. There's plenty of room. You don't need these fancy little mini wrenches. Look at everything from behind. Wiring's pretty hidden. Go ahead and pop the cut cap I mentioned earlier on it right now. And that is how it's going to look on the back of the car. You don't see any wires. It's always there when you need it. Pop that cap off, throw it in the car. And you can have a quick and easy utility trailer hookup to pull whatever you want. Probably pull a jet ski with this car, ATV, dirt bikes, motorcycle, whatever kind of toys you may have. Last thing I said I wanted to do, what I'm going to do right now, is drill a couple holes, probably just one hole to the inside of this wire here, and run it around the back lip here to strain relief these wires and to hold them up. And the nice part about all this is the majority of the wiring and everything is nested behind the OEM jack point that hangs down lower here. So majority of the wires and everything are not exposed to anything hitting it from underneath the car, from road debris and whatnot. So I'm very confident that this setup will last many, many years. There is a very minimal hitch sticking down, probably only a 1/2 inch total of everything below the OEM jack point. So this is a really nice, robust shield to protect everything, including the wiring. Here you go. This is a final look at the install. You can see I got my little zip tie there, strain relieving it. I know I mentioned earlier that I was going to do some black conduit, but the way this all came out and how well it is protected behind the OEM jack point, I think the wires are fine and there's going to be no risk to them. So, you know, the nice part about it, zip tying it there, is it guarantees none of it is pulling weight on that OEM grommet. The wires kind of just hanging freely in between the OEM crash beam, the hitch, and the frame of the car, the belly pan here with the spare tires. So really no chances that tearing the wiring or anything. The only thing I will say is this is, the further you go back, the floppier you get with this, because that hitch is cut out. If you got further towards the end, towards this bend, it would be a little stiffer, but I really don't think that's going to be any issue when I connect the trailer. So I hope you guys enjoyed the install walkthrough here, and now we're going to hook up my trailer and see how everything works.